Here's you. Just while we're waiting. I could have just Bye.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, sorry.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Thanks for doing your signs. I love the balloons. Just starting the the post-coffee session now. We have three women who have been doing some amazing work in Pennine Hospitals. Lisa Elliott, Vanessa Blanchard of Elliott Blanchard Limited, and Sam Whelan, Patient Experience Midwife. That's an unusual title at Pennine Acute Hospitals. We're going to talk about the transformational work they've been doing there using feedback and social media.
Thank you. So hello, my name is Lisa, and as you can see from the slide, I'm director and co-founder at Elliott Blanchard, but actually I'm more proud of the fact that I'm a general nurse and sick children's nurse, and I've worked in the NHS for 30 years. My last role in the NHS, employed by the NHS, was head of care, and within that role I worked alongside Vanessa. So we've been working together for about 10 years, and Vanessa's also co-founder of Elliott Blanchard. So I'm Lisa Elliott and Vanessa's Vanessa Blanchard. Quite an easy one. Sam is somebody that we've been working with for the last 6 months, and as Caroline said, quite an unusual job title. It was a pilot project that we're going to share with you today, which is now a permanent position. And Sam is Patient Experience Midwife at Pennine Acute. So our presentation title that we're going to talk through with you is about transforming services for women and children using social media. But in actual fact, what I'd like to offer you really is an alternative title to begin with, and that is it's actually about changing culture through conversations. And so in order to transform experiences, we need to get this bit right. So I'm going to speak through just roughly why conversations matter, very briefly, and how those conversations can turn into change, and what we did with the pilot project. And then Sam and Vanessa will speak through the learning from the front line, what actually happened, what we changed and how we did it, and why Sam's role made the difference. In 2014, the NHS 5-year forward view said that one of our greatest strengths in this country is the NHS, and that's because it's for the people, by the people and of the people. I think that's a national treasure, because we absolutely all own the NHS, we're part of it, with individuals. It's by creating conversation. Because this is where the best bit happens. It's all very well if we speak to one person but never listen. We have to listen to really get the truth of what we're trying to do. So that's where the pilot project came from, really. We wanted to think about how we could bring about change and whether social media platforms would make the difference to what we were already doing. So we had our initial question of, would Care Opinion as the online platform, the social media platform, work if promoted with Twitter and Facebook in terms of, firstly, generating more meaningful conversations with patients and staff, secondly, in ensuring a much quicker response to improve patient experience, and then thirdly, to see if we could identify where quality improvement work needed to happen and that we could do this in a partnership way. So the project was a partnership. As I said, we worked with Care Opinion on this, and we chose Care Opinion because it was a well-existing platform that allows for patients and carers to tell their story. and to post their story in a very public way. And anybody can do this across the country. It also allowed NHS staff to respond. The mechanism on the platform is that there can be a conversation. So this was a perfect platform for us. Pennine Acute, and specifically the Women's and Children's Division, were our partners in terms of NHS frontline staff. And that was because myself and Vanessa were already working with the team on the CQC improvement plan, and we knew that this was a team that genuinely wanted to improve, and they were a team that were genuinely struggling from a morale point of view because of a lot of bad messages in the media. And so actually if we could change that around using media, that would be helpful to the staff. And then myself and Vanessa, contributing our previous experiences of having done this before in a large organisation, where we'd changed the culture from that of control and command, as Caroline alluded to at the start, to one where people are free to tweet whatever messages because the trust is there. And then another key partner was going to be the women and families, who weren't currently partners, but we needed to be able to create an ethos and culture that allowed them to become genuine partners, not just about them giving us feedback, but about them being part of the change as well. And so we needed to bind the whole thing together with a new culture of trust. So, the timeline for the project. This time last year, as I said, myself and Vanessa were already working with the team, and so we did some quality improvement work on the maternity wards in the hospital that we'd done the pilot. And so we were able to model how to do quality improvement, how to bring about changes in a different way, and how to do it with patients at the heart. And then from March to May, we were commissioned to run some quality improvement training with all of the staff from across the children's and women's wards and departments. And so they then learnt the methodology, but they had a whole day focused on using data for change, with the priority being that if it's not good for patients, don't do it. So if you don't listen to your patients, how do you know that? And then in June, we were very lucky that the secondment opportunity for Sam was approved, and she was appointed into the role of patient experience midwife, which was a trial at that point. And she then was able to have some initial training from us in quality improvement coaching in how to implement using care opinion for feedback alongside friends and family test, and how to bring that into a new way of using it so it actually led to change and wasn't just about another tick box or another listening exercise. And then care opinion, at that point, we're also able to establish their full licence with Dan and provide her with all the training and support she needed, all the resources she needed, and also support the media campaign around that through their Twitter profile. And so stories were able to be shared that were from the women, and also stories about the changes that were happening could be shared quickly. And Sam will talk to you some more about how she was part of all of that. And then tomorrow, actually, is then our first of the service user forums. So through the first, 4 to 6 months, we've been able to talk to you about. But we also know that there are certain things that what you might call wicked problems, things that there's not an obvious right thing to do. So you don't want to just react to the feedback, because actually you need some time to think about it. And so that's where this service user forum is a partnership forum. We've got Health Watch involved, commissioners, staff from the Acute Trust and Women and Families.
Looking at one maternity unit, and this has really been key to boosting staff morale. I regularly put the positive stories from Care Opinion on there for the staff to see, and if any stories come through that have put the women have gone to the trouble of naming the staff, I do make sure that I email the staff that story so they can use it for their NMC revalidation folder, which is, we have to submit now every 3 years. The stories are very powerful. They are told in real time and they're far-reaching. I do know one of the stories ended up in Guernsey, so where that went from then on, I don't know whether it quite went viral or not. It really has engaged well with the staff. It's boosted morale, which has led to an increase in our stories and provided us with, at the Pennine, with an increased opportunity for change. So the picture you can see behind me is a story swarm of the stories the women have left on Care Opinion. The first arrow, what you can see here is the stories that were shared by the women before I commenced the pilot, which wasn't very many, as you can tell. Then when I started the pilot, you can see that we had a great increase in stories. I was able to go round, I was responding really quickly to the stories, and I was able to make some changes which we'll come on to next. Where we are now is you can see there's been in some of the stories, and that's been a great learning lesson for me. What I've realised is that when I'm off and I'm not as visible on the wards, there has been a dip in the stories. So next week we are starting a new ambassador role for our bands 2 to 4 to make not only make them feel more part of the team, but so they can promote the really good work with Care Opinion, and hopefully we can get some more feedback which will lead to more changes. So, what changes have we made? The picture you can see here was left by a lady via a leaflet, which is also available for the women to tell their stories. If any of you have been in any NHS clinic, you will know they're extremely busy. This particular lady was sat in antenatal clinic. She had pelvic girdle pain, which can be very painful, and she said our chairs were really uncomfortable. That was an easy fix. We just provided more comfortable chairs for the women. So, is my room clean? A lady left a story saying a baby was on the neonatal unit and she wasn't sure if a room had been cleaned. As a result of that story, I designed complimentary cleaning cards which are now used across the unit, so when a lady isn't present and a room's clean, she can tell when she comes back it has been cleaned. And I think there's probably going to be a trust-wide rollout with that as well. So, as you can see, TENS machine, any of you use them in labour? Yeah? Well, I didn't realise that on our labour ward, so we have a labour ward and a birth centre, so birth centre's very low risk, but the labour ward, more high-tech stuff goes on there. We didn't actually have any TENS machines to support our ladies in labour. Well, we do now. So I would say this is the most powerful story for me as a health professional. My midwifery colleague there is in antenatal clinic. I've walked past these doors numerous times and never considered the ladies at the other side. At the other side of these doors is our gynecological assessment unit. So pregnancy, early pregnancy ladies come there, they might be bleeding and they might be possibly in the middle of a miscarriage. The story that was left alluded to the fact that she was pregnant, she felt sorry for the women that she could see through the clear glass. We put frosted glass on them doors now as a result, and they're 2 separate units. Dead easy to do, but what I found really powerful about that was I never considered that, and I think I know what the women want. Well, actually, unless you ask them, you don't. So it became apparent through numerous stories left via Care Opinion that there was a lack of information on our postnatal ward. So we designed an A4 laminated sheet. I don't think it's very clear on that picture there, but it's basic really, but it tells the women where they can get the breakfast. It talks about partners staying over and things like that. And as I said before, my role is now developed and I'm involved in other projects, but through being visible on the ward, the staff now come to me and want to share their ideas to improve our service. So this is the waiting area in our postnatal ward. Before it was very bland. They wanted to improve it. So what did we do? We commissioned an artist, and now we have a thank you tree. And there is more thank you cards and pictures of babies on that tree than that is actually in the picture there. So what's next for us? We had lots of stories through Care Opinion saying that there was various viewpoints on partners staying over on our postnatal ward. We encourage partners or mums to stay overnight. Part of the really early days of having a baby is that you've got your family close by for support. But we had different viewpoints from the women. Some were happy and some weren't. So our proposed project is, should partners be staying on the postnatal ward overnight, and from tomorrow, as Lisa said, we're going to start our quality improvement forum, looking at additional data collection, develop solutions using the PDSA test of change, and we're going to make recommendations for our next steps to improve the service for our women at Oldham. And next, we have the lovely Vanessa.
Hello, my name's Vanessa. So I'm going to share some of the learning from the pilot project that we had. So let's talk about what our recipe for success was. So our first ingredient was the Care Opinion social media platform. This was really key as it was a platform where we could respond to and communicate and have conversations with the women who were leaving their feedback. It also meant that we could pull data as well as the stories and print infographics that could be used in the ward environments. The next key to success was obviously the lovely Sam that you've just met. So she was key to the whole project, she was pivotal and pushed forward with all of the improvements. So she was the one that actually responded to all of the stories that were left on the site by the women, and she was also the one that communicated all of that feedback back to the wards. So it was making sure that there was a whole loop of information that kept coming around. So whether that feedback was positive or negative, it was fed back to the wards so that they could improve upon the things that they were working amongst. And for us at Elliott Blanchard, we obviously did some of the quality improvement training. So this was key, as it was the fact that staff knew what to do with the data, they could understand the data, analyse the data, and then implement the improvements going forward. And the last thing was about permission. So luckily Sam had a really good senior team that we'd been working with for nearly 12 months, and one of the key things was to work on and make the improvements. One of the key things about this for the staff was actually the teams we were working with, their morale was at absolute rock bottom when we started working with them. They'd been bashed by bad press stories and were really feeling the pressure, and that actually we had many staff that were in tears talking to us because they felt like they weren't doing a good job. So for them to actually see the feedback coming from the women, highlighting what good service they were providing, really boosted morale on the ward and also helped the staff to improve things where there were issues. So a little bit more data here. So what you can see is the first line, which is the 12 months before we started the project. You can see that there were 6 stories left on the Care Opinion site with no responses, no changes, and it was viewed by 755 people. So that's 6 women that have gone onto the site and left their stories for Pennine Acute Hospitals, and nobody's responded to them. So I can tell you that some of those 6 stories were negative stories. So as we all know, if you leave a review or an opinion and you get no response, it's not always good and can then lead to formal complaints. And also as well, the 755 people that viewed those stories that had absolutely no response to them. So it wasn't portraying a good image of what we wanted to achieve at Pennine Acute. The line at the bottom is what happened during the 6-month pilot. So during the 6-month pilot, we actually received 176 stories on the system. We also had 184 responses. Now there are more responses because, as we talked about, some of it was two-way communication. We had 7 changes that were implemented that Sam talked to you about earlier, and we had 7,290 views of those stories. So if you remember my previous graph, that's 7,000 people that have viewed mainly positive stories about Pennine Acute. So for women that are coming into Pennine Acute Hospitals, most of them are provided with the option of giving birth at 4 different hospitals. So for us as a centre, it's really important that people can see that good feedback because it makes people want to come and give birth within our trust. So did we achieve what we set out to achieve? So we did generate more meaningful conversations with both the patients and the staff, as Sam already alluded to. Did we ensure quicker responses to improve the patient experience? Well, I can tell you that from the stories that were left on the Care Opinions site, 83% of them were responded to within 3 days. So the majority of stories that were put on there, people got a response within that 3-day period, which meant that people knew that something was being done if they'd left a bad review. It has identified where structured quality improvements can be made. As Lisa and Sam have talked about, we've got the forum that's starting tomorrow, which will ensure a partnership approach to achieving change. So what did we not do so well? Nothing's ever perfect, is it? So we could have started off better by having a readiness checklist. What we found is that actually we set off quite quickly with the pilot, and it actually took us longer to get Sam released than we originally anticipated. So we probably had about a month and a half at the beginning of the project where Sam wasn't in a full-time position to drive it through. Culture, we've talked about wanting a culture of trust. As everybody knows, when you're trying to change culture, it's a very slow process and it takes quite a while to embed. So I'd say that probably coming up to the 6-month mark now, it is just starting to get embedded. Staff are feeling comfortable to tweet and write things on Facebook, because for them it's quite a new practice. And it's okay to start small. So when we started at the beginning of the project, we had children's wards as well within the division that asked whether they could be part of the pilot. So what we found with letting them start at the same time as maternity is that actually they didn't succeed as well. They didn't have a SAM in place, they didn't have the quality improvement training, and they didn't have that support there. So really we should have just started with the women's and children's and then rolled out for the next steps. And then we come back to the good old social media permissions. So whilst the trust were quite happy for people to tweet and have social media accounts and send it from their own personal accounts, once the wards got used to all the social media activity going on, they actually wanted their own ward Facebook and Twitter accounts that were open to the public. However, the trust doesn't feel it's quite at the point yet where it can trust the staff enough to have those accounts yet. So it is a work in progress and we are getting there, but obviously it is slow to change. So I'm going to get you all up and moving now. So, if any of you have ever used Snapchat, can you stand up? See, there were loads. Lisa's teenage daughter thought that we were all too old for Snapchat, and I had to do that one first because no one had stand up. If you've ever used Facebook, can you stand up? Instagram? Twitter? What else have I got there? LinkedIn? TripAdvisor? Have I got anyone sat down? Shout. No? Okay. Oh, there is one. None? No. Oh, there's two at the back. Okay, you can all sit down now. So the majority of you do use social media of some format. So we all know that social media is now part of our world. I know what the lady who was speaking this morning said that you use it all the time, day in, day out. Everyone's on it all the time. You're looking at it once or twice a day. I know that personally for me, before I go on holiday, I spend about 3 hours on TripAdvisor, reading up all about the hotels, what's said about them, what's good, what's not good, and it informs my decision that I make. If I'm going out for a meal at the weekend, I might look at their Facebook page, see what the menu is, see what the food is. And again, it informs the decisions that I make going forward. If we use social media in such a trivial way for holidays and for food, why would we not use it to look into where we're going to give birth to our child or where we're going to have an operation? At the point where we're putting our lives in someone else's hands, why would we not use that information? And that is the way of the world now. There is more and more information out there. It's more information that there is now on social media. It's about gathering that information as trusts, using that information to make changes and moving forward with it. The reason that we all joined the NHS or worked in the NHS or used the NHS is because we want good patient experience. We're lucky to have the NHS in this country. We're lucky to work in the NHS and we all want what's best for our patients. So use the data that's out there and have a look at what that information is telling you. Care Opinion is out there for all trusts. Have you looked what it says about your trust? Has anybody responded to any of that information? Have a look about and think about that. We will be delighted for you to join us this afternoon at our round table event. Also, we are at a social media conference, so if anybody would like to follow us on social media, our Twitter accounts are there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. What a great example of well-coordinated, thought-through use of social media to actually make an impact on services. This is fantastic. Do we have any questions? I can see some on my laptop on Slido. One's a comment, fantastic examples of simple things making a big difference. Okay, one of the questions is, how do you share your successes amongst colleagues and, is it there, across local organisations? So they can, don't you go back to the microphone here?
So I regularly tweet out really positive stories that we've received from Care Opinion. I also put up the stories around the department for our staff to see. We have not only made an impact on maternity, but we get stories about the anaesthetic team in theatre, the doctors. So I also make it my point to inform those teams as well, because they are part of our wider multidisciplinary team, and it's really important that they are aware of the positive feedback that we're getting. Our other local NHS organisations, again, I think we rely heavily on Twitter. People know people know people know people as Twitter goes along, you know. And like I said, the story that ended up in Guernsey, that was actually Guernsey Hospital Trust who were aware of that patient story. So Twitter really has been really phenomenal in sharing our success stories.
Here. Okay, so one that's got vote. How do you gain patient opinion? Do you have a patient public group? Is that possibly because people don't understand what care opinion is? Perhaps you just explain what that is a little bit more. And just one other question before we finish on Slido, perhaps. What's the first thing? The first thing you want to copy, what you want to see. Answer those two.
So just quickly then to explain about care opinion, and I probably won't do it the justice it deserves, but I can tell you that Tim and Callie are here from Care Opinion, so they'll be on our roundtable event and they're waving now. So any of you that want to know more about it then, please speak to them. But essentially it works like TripAdvisor. There is a portal, Care Opinion portal, accessible to anybody in the public. You can Google it, you can find it, you can look up your local trust or any trust and read stories and post stories. So in a simple kind of analogy, that's what it's like, and they'll give you much more details about it. In terms of what you can do first to copy what we've been doing, I think the key is really about thinking, how can that, well, first of all, pick the right team. You know, as Vanessa said, start small. Pick the right team that do want to change and that have a real driver for change. Think about the best social media platforms. So Care Opinion, like we said, is perfect in that it's already set up for conversation. So you are posting and seeing a response. That's the start of a conversation. Whereas some of the other platforms are much more about megaphone approaches if you're not careful. But then coupling that with the other approaches like Twitter, like Facebook, blogs, we also use blogs to promote what we're doing. And so using that to promote what you're doing and maybe generate other conversations as well. So I think the key is find the right platform, find the right team, and start with a quality improvement methodology really. That whole philosophy that we have of, if it's not good for patients, don't do it. So if you don't know what's good for patients, you don't ask them, then how are you ever going to know what to change? So I think that's also a key message to give.
Anyone want to put a hand up who hasn't been on Slido before we move on? John, yes?
Have we got a microphone?
Microphone. This is John Popham, by the way, who's live streaming videos of all the presentations. Digital storyteller.
Yeah, thank you. Not working. Hello? Yeah. I really love what you're doing. I've spent years and years trying to get public servants of all kinds to tell their stories on social media, and very often, you know, they're reluctant to do so. They say, "Well, I'm just doing my job," and my point to them is always, "Well, if you don't tell your story, you leave it open to the people to tell negative things about you." And it's interesting you said that there's,
unlike closed Facebook groups, individuals have to use their real names on them platforms. On Care Opinion, it's actually anonymous. So the ladies can say exactly what they want without fear of reprise. You know, if they're sat on the postnatal ward and they're not happy with the care, they will go on and they will say so, but they will say so anonymously, which is it's really powerful for them, you know. So I think through Care Opinion and having the anonymity is a really powerful tool for the success of the pilot, actually.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to introduce now Dr. Leslie Robinson of the University of Salford, where she's a reader and part of the team behind Women You Hear More About. Leslie.
Thank you. I'll just give an additional thumbs up to Care Opinion, because we use that now with our students at the University of Salford. All of the allied health professions are taught to use Care Opinions by way of teaching them how to communicate in a professional way online. So great, the Care Opinions team have been so professional helping us with that. So just an endorsement there for us as well. Okay, well, my talk is going to cover the use of social media both in the research context and also in the practice context, out in practice, in clinical practice. And I will try to discuss these as two slightly separate contexts, because we've got different degrees of success and different things that we've learned from those different contexts. However, the illustration that I'll use to talk about those two things is combined within one project, which we've called the Women Project. So in a way, it's a little bit difficult to, to separate the two concepts out, but I'll try to do that, because I think what I'll hopefully demonstrate through this talk is it's actually easier to engage patients and practitioners together online in a research project than it is out in the public domain in a clinical type of project. But we'll see how we go on with that. So I'm just going to take you quickly through the journey of the Women Project. We started in 2013, so it's about a 5-year-old project. And we had a question right at the beginning of the project, which involved looking at patient information for breast screening. So this is about breast screening and giving patients enough information. And we had an idea that we wanted to produce some online information, but not just information. We wanted to use a social media type of information forum. So I didn't know too much about social media, and I decided it would be really, really important to get a multi-professional group together, and in particular to get patients on that group. So in 2013 we got a group together. We did some user-centered design work. We created the Women Hub, which went live in 2015. In 2016, we started to do some implementation work to make sure that practitioners and employers were behind what we were trying to do, because there was no point getting women to go online to talk to practitioners if there was no women to talk to them, which is what the previous group had just illustrated with a lot of examples of that. Particularly, I'm not sure if you're aware that NHS Choices have got Health Unlocked as their social media platform. So for all the pathologies that you want to go online and look up conditions, you do have the opportunity to chat. But those chat groups are not, to my understanding, and certainly not within the area that I'm interested in, they're not moderated in any way, and they're not engaged with by health professionals. It tends to be patients talking to each other. And then we're now at 2017, and we're at an evaluation stage, and we're also at a point where we're really doing a lot of interesting work around using digital media to promote and target specific groups. I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end. But the main purpose here is not to try to increase the numbers of women going for breast screening, but it's to give patients information and information that will help them to make choices and decisions about whether to go for breast screening, because it's a really contentious area with lots of information out in the media about the pros and the cons of breast screening. So we wanted to try and help women with that sort of information. During the 5 years, we have, as a research group, we've made sure that all of our work has been evaluated, written up, shared, and you'll see there that we've got book chapters, peer-reviewed articles, which I'll allude to as we go through. And we were really proud to be awarded the College of Radiographers Team of the Year last year for our Women Project, and we were also shortlisted for the Health Innovations Award last year as well. So I think we've got a fairly robust project in terms of the Women Project. So I mentioned that we've got a multi-professional team. A few of the team are sitting in the room here. That was really key, and that again was mentioned by the previous group. This is social media is where multiple disciplines start to interact. We have got media psychologists in there. We've got business marketing experts, digital marketing experts, clinical practitioners, and most importantly, users, so service users, patients, members of the public, who need to tell us what it is they want. There's no point us as academics sitting there thinking we'll design some patient information hub if it's not what people want. So it was really important that we got multiple groups involved in this team. So I mentioned this started off with a project in 2012-13 where we were asking women what they thought about the pain during mammography, and I don't know if anybody's had a mammogram in the room, but you can imagine what it's like to have your breast squashed between two plates. And so we were doing some work around what perceptions of pain were, and out of that work came the notion that actually the information that patients get is this unidirectional information that people have alluded to this morning that comes from the NHS breast screening programme, that's in a leaflet, hard copy format. Actually, it is online now, but there's no opportunity to go back and ask further questions. And it's what we feel people want to know, and it's full of quantitative information about risks, and it is quite off-putting. And our study showed that actually women felt really poorly informed about what breast screening was about. As a result of that, that increased their anxiety, and that increases their perceptions of pain, and so there were some links to patient information. And again, like I think it was Caroline who mentioned earlier on, people prefer word of mouth when they're trying to find information about an intervention or a procedure such as breast screening. So that, coupled with Ofcom statistics that at the time suggested that women in that particular age group were the growing group that were starting to use social media. They had the biggest increase in activity over the last few years. And the NHS communication strategy, the power of information that came out in 2012, which advocates the use of online methods for practitioners to talk to patients. We thought, right, well, that's what we need to do. We need to produce some sort of social media hub group to talk about breast screening and what they might want in a breast screening hub. And we did some analysis. We looked at how many people signed up to the group. And during the period of analysis, which was a six-month period while we had that closed Facebook group talking about breast screening, we had 89 participants sign up. We had more in the end, but just over this 6 months of analysis, we had 89 women. And during that 6-month period, we analysed all of the posts, and there were 206 posts, 1,124 comments, 570 likes, and 67 of those 89 participants were actively involved in discussions. And we developed a real community of women talking not just about breast screening, but about lots of other things that we were interested in, because that is one of the key things if you want to start to develop a community of practice online, is to not, especially if you're using it in research, is not just to start by firing questions out. Okay, what do you want in a hub? Is to start to develop relationships just as you would in any social encounter. So there were lots of offline conversations. Remember, we did this in order to try to give women an opportunity to be involved in our research at a time and place that was convenient for them. So we analysed when they participated, and they participated, the resolution on this is not particularly good, but those are days of the week, so they participated every day of the week. And those are hours of the day. So you can see people are participating every hour. We've even got people participating at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning. And as a 50-odd-year-old woman, I can tell you you do tend to wake up at that time of the morning, you know, with hormones doing all sorts of things. So we were online talking to each other about breast screening and other women's sorts of things. But interestingly, the most active time is 8 o'clock in the evening for women to go onto Facebook. So it was really useful as a research tool. We then analysed these posts, and I'd like to thank Kathy Yo, who's in the room somewhere. Kathy, stick your hand up. Yeah, Kathy was my an analyst in this, and what we did was we analysed all of the posts to identify what themes there were, to find out what people talked about, and therefore what would go into our final hub. And we did a framework analysis, so we were able to separate out what different groups wanted: practitioners, patients, other healthcare professionals, not just mammographers, so a whole range of different people, and that enabled us to make the hub fairly nuanced in terms of the different areas that might be on the hub for people to go to. And what did we find? Well, and we found that as well, and this has just been written up and accepted in an open access journal, the Journal of Medical Internet Research for Cancer, so you can access that, find out a little bit more. So here is the hub itself. That's what it looks like. Actually, it's been updated a little bit since that last slide, because we've now got patient stories on there as well. But we've got the opportunity, we've got forums where patients can talk to practitioners. We've also got forums where practitioners can just practitioners themselves, which is more of a closed forum. This forum where patients talk to practitioners is open in terms of being able to read the posts, but if you want to post, you have to log in and register. Now that has caused some problems, but we did that because that's what women on the closed Facebook group said they wanted. They want an element of privacy, but that adds clunkiness to the whole conversation. And you'll find in a moment that actually our Facebook site that we've set up in addition to the hub for sharing information has been a lot more successful for the sharing of stories. Now this additional Facebook group, well, we've got Twitter as well. Let me just tell you about Twitter first. We've got a sort of a sister Twitter account, and we've got something like 600 odd followers on there now. But we've also decided, because Facebook was so successful, we will still use Facebook, but we've opened it up. So we've got two separate Facebook accounts. We've got the closed one, which was just for research, and now this is our open Facebook page, which anybody can go on to talk about breast screening. So the Twitter and the Facebook feed into the Women Hub. So you go into the Women Hub, you can see both Facebook and Twitter. And the reason for that is that we all use different platforms, we all have different preferences, and we didn't want to pin people down just to one. And if people want to leave an open message there, that's fine. If they want to leave something more closed on the closed hub, then that's fine as well. And you can't read this story here, but this was a lovely story on the Facebook group, where the open Facebook page, where somebody told us all about the fact that she'd just been for a mammogram and she was recalled and she was really worried, and there were lots of people posting up to sort of encourage her to go back and not to be worried, and then she followed it up with what happened next. And so there was a real sense of community there about this woman's breast screening journey. Remember, patients said they wanted to be able to read experiences of other women, and they also wanted to post their experiences. And we found somebody on the Facebook page who had said that she'd had great experience of mammogram. We contacted her through the Facebook and we said, do you want to put it into a blog? And well, she was amazed at being asked. She was really, really pleased that she'd been asked to write a blog. It gives people voice. We've heard about anonymity this morning. That is okay, but we mustn't forget that actually the benefit of social media is empowerment of the public and giving people voice. And we mustn't always assume people want to be anonymous. Some do, and as health professionals, we have to be very careful about that. But there's a lot of people out there that don't want to be anonymous. They want to share their stories. And that was the case here for Jean Phillips, who was one of our patients who wanted to talk about her experience. In terms of information, we've got a drop-down box, and all of the subjects there are the subjects that patients told us on the closed Facebook group they wanted. So we've really been able to produce a hub, a resource that we feel is designed by people for people, so designed by the public for the public, and designed by practitioners for practitioners. So that's where we're at in terms of the hub. It was launched in 2015. 2016 brought us some challenges, and this is where we wanted to start to implement it. It was really important, as I say, that we get practitioners accepting this. Patients clearly are accepting it. Patients are miles ahead of practitioners in terms of their eagerness to go online and talk and get information about health. But we weren't sure whether that was the case for practitioners. And there are some systematic reviews that have been published in the States, actually, looking at people's practitioners' attitudes to using social media. And all the things that you might imagine are apparent in that literature. Anxieties around professionalism, being shown up as not having knowledge that they should have because it's all online and people can see it, being struck off for doing something wrong, risk management, managers are all worried about that. So we did some workshops with mammography practitioners around the country to find out if that was truly the case here in this country with our mammographers. So we said, look, we produced this great resource for you. Some of you have been involved in helping us. Patients have been involved. Will you use it? We also looked at employers' policies, and Bev Scragg at the front here is one of our team who did most of the work around looking at policies. And we looked at, we tried to look at 10 policies, communication policies on social media from the Northwest. Trusts that had breast screening, because we were keeping within the breast screening context. And we managed to get hold of 9. The 10th one wasn't available. And we did some content analysis, and that was really quite interesting. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. Social media brings public and practitioners together, doesn't it? Well, actually, patients want to use it. They want to use it to support their decisions and to talk to practitioners and to affect change, as we've seen in the last group. But what we found with those 2 pieces of work is that practitioners are still anxious. So we had these 4 workshop groups across the country. We talked to 80, 90 practitioners, and the outcome was that, yeah, it's a great site, but I'm not sure I want to go on there. I even had managers contacting me saying, one of my staff wants to come on one of your workshops, but I told her she can't come because I'm worried that she's going to say something she shouldn't do when she goes online. And I said, well, okay, but are you not worried if she's lacking knowledge about something, are you not worried she's going to say something to a patient in a face-to-face encounter? Well, yeah, but nobody'd know about that because it's just face-to-face. These are the sorts of things that we were being told. So there is still an awful lot of work to do around that. And when we investigated the employers' policies in the Northwest, chronic illness that need to support each other. So there may be some of the issues that are underpinning our findings here. Again, these social marketing and adverts going onto Facebook and targeting people. And we're worried there in terms of external companies, trying to do their marketing. But actually, we can use, as health providers, we can use that notion, that concept of digital marketing to increase uptake in something like the breast screening arena, and not just breast screening, any screening, where we want patients to start to consider making choices, and they have to make choices in order to decide to go for a particular investigation. Then we can direct them to information that they wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity to access before, and wouldn't have known was available. And so we've started to use Facebook ads to target low uptake areas within the Northwest region with our Women Hub. And then we can have a look on our Women Hub to see whether people have come via those ads. So it's really quite clever, and this is where we've got the digital marketing people on board, because this is something I know nothing about as a radiographer. I know how to x-ray the women, I don't know about how to get them through these digital means. So watch this space really with regard to digital marketing. This schematic really just illustrates that social media exists in lots and lots of different platforms, which somebody nicely illustrated in the last talk, and we all got up and said which ones we're using. And that's something that's really important to bear in mind if you are considering using social media in research or in developing your own communities and your own hubs, is to be aware where you can use it in the research cycle. And depending on where you use it and which patient population you're using, you need to decide which is the most appropriate social media tool. So if you're targeting a younger age group, if you're targeting cervical screening, for instance, you wouldn't necessarily go to Facebook. And the Ofcom statistics, Ofcom produced some really good statistics about which age groups are using which social media platforms, so that's a useful thing to do. But really, really important is up on number 7 there, and this is the research cycle, you know, initiate, collaborate, get participants involved, collect some data, write up and disseminate. Disseminate is so important if you've got patients and involved and they're putting the time and effort into working with you to develop these things, is that you come back to the patients and say what it is you've done with their information. So again, you've got to all of the relevant social media platforms to disseminate that information. And we are, I think we've got a lot of work to do to put research information into an accessible format, not just for patients. I don't want to undermine patients, but also practitioners. Research currently sits in these sort of academic writing, in academic textbooks, and they can be really difficult to access and consequently don't get read a lot of the time. So just to summarise, social media enables convenient patient and public involvement in user-centred design. And that if you use user-centred design, that makes sure that your outputs are relevant to the group that you've been working with. It can be used at all stages of the research cycle, but I think this is really important. The patients and public are ahead of the game. We've got a lot to do to get practitioners involved for a lot of various reasons. And one of the workshops, the workshop that Caroline and I will be running this afternoon, will be exploring a great idea that we've got to address that. So we hope you'll join us there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's fantastic. Yes, we have got ideas. We'd like to actually do something with all this enthusiasm and passion for engaging more health staff on social media. So if you can join us, we'd love you to. Any questions for Leslie? I know there's some. Do you want to pick a couple out there, Leslie?
Yeah, we did. We did a lot of work looking at what else had been done elsewhere. That's disappeared off. We looked at all the various sites. There wasn't anything that was just quite what we wanted. Macmillan do have a fantastic site for patients and discussions, but we felt that we wanted the opportunity to have blogs and things on there as well. So there's just a little bit more that our site does. Do you think staff are scared to use social media because there's too much on the risk and not on the benefit? Absolutely, it's too much on the risks and not on the benefits, and I think that just comes from the media in general. If you look at what does the media say about social media, we never hear about these great stories, you know, that we've heard about today. Well, I would say never. They are dominated by negative stories rather than positive stories. So we've got a lot to do around that.
Any questions from the room? You wanted to put your hand up? No? Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Leslie. Haven't we heard from some amazing people this morning? Thank you so much for all the speakers for really inspirational stories, suggestions, and sharing experiences. So we're going to break for lunch, and before we do, just a couple of things to ask you. The poll result, first of all, if you look on the Slido poll, if you can get that up, we asked, how good is the NHS at enabling staff to use social media? And overwhelmingly, the result that came up with the most votes was, could be better. There was a small number that said bad. I think there was an equally small number that said good. So there you go. I think we knew that already, didn't we? But it confirms that for you. So your next activity during this afternoon is going to be making those fab change pledges. Don't forget about that. Please take the opportunity over lunch to make your pledge, tweet it out, use hello my name is, that'd be wonderful. And that's it. We'll be coming back here after lunch at 1:10 it's quite exact, isn't it? But if you could be ready to go at 1:10. Just one final request to all our speakers. Could you come to the front of the room, whether you've spoken this morning or this afternoon? We're going to do a few photos, and we'll see everyone back here shortly. Thank you.